my vocal journey, exploring the true voice, has taken me to some very interesting places. And I always think about coming back to the most authentic aspect of your voice as a rediscovery, implying that this true voice is something within us that has always been there. And the vocal journey is an active process and decision to pursue strengthening a relationship with your most authentic self. And in the last few days, there was definitely a shift within my own vocal practice, where I was using my voice much more in an exploratory way to go inward to access a sound which sounds perhaps obvious in the context of voice work and vocal pedagogy, and also from a philosophical, emotional perspective as well. Sounds really easy, doesn't it? Go within, find the voice inside. But I do feel the spiral as a symbol, a literal metaphor, really expresses this dance or this dialogue really well, because we are moving all the time, unwinding hopefully, along this path, and coming back always to revisit points like the circle. We think of compass points and all these different angles, and as we continue to move around, it's returning to themes or realizations with new insight and awareness. And in these last days, the call to really come in actually began with some stillness and some quiet, which is often challenging when you are working so actively with the voice, to allow yourself and to remind yourself that rest and reflection and quiet are also part of that process. So some days you might feel like you want to do a lot of sounding and moving energy through the body using your voice, and other days not so much. But by really committing to a daily practice of some form to build consistency and to build resilience and to discover habits, patterns, and glean information from listening to the sounds you're making and tuning into the sensations that they're bringing forth for you, that seems to be a good way. But even within that process, sometimes there are days where actually you need to really check in with that deep inner stirring, or the small voice which maybe doesn't get heard so often, or is not given so much space and attention to really express its needs, because perhaps your habit of expressing and sounding is tied into a releasing with a kind of pushing quality of like, okay, I want to get this out, which serves its purpose as far as certain aspects of trauma release work goes, and it also serves its purpose as far as developing more confidence in articulation and performative qualities as well. But an over exertion in that area does reduce one's ability to hear that impulsive communication space within with such clarity. So only with the practice and the continued commitment to give yourself space for different forms of expression that allow the voice to expand and open up, can we come to those realizations about when is the right moment to take some rest and when is the right moment to push through a perceived barrier. And hopefully, as one goes through that process, the tools, what's required, they make themselves visible to you just through that act of listening and honouring the body, the emotions, the spirit, and the psychology of the voice also. So this, I would say, a moment of quiet in the grand scheme of the vocal journey to date. It's been a very momentary point of vocal rest, but potent enough for it to bring through deep insight and awareness into where the next step is. So it's almost like a pause where the road branches off in one direction, or there's a curve and you're making a decision about whether you try to cut through or if you follow the natural flow of things. And to come back to that thread of this true voice within us, and the efforts and attempts to give that space to come through with clarity and with confidence, I would say within a common strand to all the teachers, other practitioners that I've dialogued with on this subject, it always comes back to the core of what this internal sound is. What is that? Where is that? And how do we access that? How can we find that? And the tools that we use to access and tap into that place do evolve over time. And the ways in which we try to come at it. So I reflect on my recent time in Mongolia and receiving all these transmissions through direct teaching with throat singing masters, each with a different quality and a different expertise in their own right. Because the lessons were conducted in Mongolian language, and the reason for that was not wanting to disrupt the flow and the transmission from teacher to student, so that they wouldn't need to change anything about their way of teaching. But I had taken steps with language to reach a level suitable for basic comprehension, and it went beyond basic comprehension, but of course a very, very long way away from completely fluid understanding and fluency. Although as time went on, over the 4 months that I was there, it got better and better because I was using it every day in all different contexts and aspects of life. But the point around the lessons was that with the added, I don't want to say barrier, but with the added challenge of the linguistic communication not being in my own mother tongue, that created an opportunity for me to really immerse deeply into the lesson space from a learner's point of view in a very energetically open way, because I perceived that to be the best way for me to be able to drink in and draw the information. And given the nature of voice work being hugely physical and energetic and emotional, it meant that was not too much of a challenge for me to do that. There were other elements of information that I could draw on to inform the practice, the approach, the interpretation of the information that I was being given. And then as time goes on, the more you are practicing using those intuitive capabilities, the stronger they become, the more sensitive and heightened they become. And what I have realized in this last week in particular is that from those transmissions, being in, say, imagine a completely open container to receive information, the rate at which one can integrate that information, to process it and to utilize it, and to transform it and express it, there's too much there for it to just be a completely like, okay, here's the transmission, you're the student, receive this information and get it just like that. And of course, voice work and vocal development does not work like that either. It's a process, and each new skill or component or evolution of one's practice is a journey in and of itself. So all of the saturation and the richness of those learning experiences, I was really kind of trying to cultivate this sponge quality, just to draw as much in as I could. And I feel like there have been some deeper understandings in the last few days, and some kind of bits of information that have clicked or fallen into place, which is a really powerful thing to feel. And because those realizations have come through vocal practices that I have taken away from that experience and brought into my life here and now, and that I'm using every day, I can definitely attribute those clicks to that experience. And the reason I wanted to talk about that was to come back to this idea of our authentic voice, our true voice, our unique frequency, our own personal sound. Because similarly, what I did pick up from each of my teachers really were approaches largely related to articulation, because in trying to create the hume, the skre hume, the harchra, the skre harchra, and these other throat singing qualities, it really was about refamiliarizing oneself and learning to new depths about the vocal apparatus, using completely new muscles, and using them in a way that they had not been before. So a lot of my lessons were very much about pushing the sound, projecting, articulating clearly, finding the correct level of resonance in order to create the undertone, the overtone, and a lot of the communication of that was really about, okay, it's about finding this energy to release it. And it is something that I have struggled with within even the classical Western tradition, in terms of a transmission and a teaching of how to let that voice out. Because the more we focus on trying to exert that energy, in some respects we are further away from this internal sound. So it's really emerging ever more about striking this balance between what is going out and how we can achieve that, and then where it's coming from and the intention behind it. And one doesn't work without the other, vice versa. So I was sitting and working with some toning on vowel sounds, and I had been really, over this last 6 months, almost 6 months, working with the sound in terms of projection and strengthening and finding that clarity that I want to bring out with the overtone, and just also general voice quality. A strong sound, a clear sound with lots of colour. And this pause, this vocal pause, or this vocal rest, we'll call it, gave me an opportunity to dialogue with the internal voice, which was enough of a stimulus for me to think about bringing this reflection inward. So in all this effort to strengthen and to project and to release and to free and to open up, which is particularly emphasized when one has had traumas which have actually closed down and shut down the voice and restricted it. So there's always that kind of knock-on effect where there's an exertion trying to break past those barriers. And obviously, having reached a point of having achieved that on some level of knocking down a restriction that was previously there, it's then about, okay, but there's something more here. There's a quality still that I don't feel is like fully resonant or fully expressing my truth. And how is that? Why is that? And really just working the voice, using it, expressing it, and sounding it as much as possible to really listen to it and try and catch, like, oh, is it there? Is it there fleetingly? A moment of my sound, or is that just nice sound? Or trying to unpick all of these restrictions about vocal aesthetic to allow oneself to just sound without judgment, and that practice itself is super challenging, because it brings up all sorts of stuff about self-worth and vulnerability and wanting to seek acceptance and recognition from other people, which are all kind of speaking to the childish self in a way, like all of these things of just wanting to be seen, felt, heard, understood, which are core. They are core core things that have an impact on how we communicate with everybody, especially ourselves. But I was like, okay, this is like not radical as far as a practice goes, but radical perhaps in terms of a commitment to pursue something that doesn't feel totally comfortable, because it brings up emotions and it brings up unresolved trauma. It was really about, okay, this sound that I am looking for, that I know is within me, that I have felt and that I have connected with and tuned into, and that I've been working on to try and kind of coax out ever more. Let's get straight in there. Let's actually dive inside and take away the pressure, take away the, okay, we need to force it out, and rather soften, open, create a safe container, the body, the energetic body, the mental body, create a safe container for this sound to arise of its own accord and to spiral out, and just really sinking into the sound. So it's still the words to describe the process in a holistic way are challenging, because if we take the logical, rational language that relates to a kind of an anatomical framework of understanding about the way that the breathing apparatus works and how we maintain air pressure, etc., it seems so simple. It seems really like, okay, so we support the breath, we utilize the diaphragm in an efficient way, we remove extraneous tension, we create a balance between muscular effort and exertion, and then softness and openness, and this voice just comes out. But for those of you who are already working with the voice, and for those of you who might not be yet, this makes me smile, because it's this paradoxical element of like, it's as easy and it's not as easy as that, and at least in our attempts to even tantalize and entertain ourselves with the idea that we might bother to go on a journey of self-discovery and willingness to explore ourselves and reveal ourselves and express ourselves. We are going to be drawn into ever more myriad of ways in which this quality that we are seeking, we come to understand it on a different level every day. So this is why I use the vocal journey as a framework of understanding, because this idea of the true voice is not an end point or a final destination. It's a process of working with the voice, and I say with, really emphasizing this relationship, this cooperative relationship, this dialogue with the self, because only when we are resonating with this internal impulse can we express it. And so much of this is about safety, creating conditions of safety for it to emerge. And when I initially began a deeper research journey with this, I was really looking into like the sociology of voice, and this is something that has been written about within holistic voice work extensively. The assertion that within culture and within society there are components of the way things are structured and implemented and acted out that in fact it would seem are not particularly conducive or supportive in allowing us to fully, comfortably express our unique qualities, our independent creativity and thought form, and our emotional expression to the fullest range. And then perhaps our spiritual curiosity. So if we take this narrative of a bigger restriction that plays upon our perception of our autonomy and how we use our voices, and most crucially our confidence in how we feel we can express ourselves. The bleed from this, the impact of this, permeates our whole consciousness about our voices in a deep way. And this is largely then a psychology of voice. How do we think about voice and voices? Which voices are we told are good or bad? You know, we have value judgments that are imprinted or encouraged on us. And through the structures that deliver culture and frameworks that contribute to the operation of how society flows and functions, we are faced with voice every day and faced with challenges about which voices might be more important than others, or which ones we should listen to and which ones we shouldn't listen to. So I don't want to go too much into that, because there are far more experienced academics and practitioners and writers on this subject of sociology and voice, who I have to say have been foundational for me in my understanding, comprehension and criticism of factors which limit our capacity and confidence in expression of personal truth. But what I can speak to is that in relation to personal lived experience of vocal restriction, and my experiences as an educated white Western woman would be synonymous with many others with a similar background. And I could speak to, through personal experience, of course, our education systems and our institutions and structures and different cultural activities and interactions which have informed, shaped, educated and cultured me into different ways of using the voice, and some have been enriching, some have been restricting, and of course within personal dynamics, within relationship and family, and the layers of communication that go on there. But being in touch with vocal restriction and limitation and this quality of losing oneself and therefore losing one's voice, I didn't think I would so deeply be invited into a deep and literal examination of this process in the way that I have experienced. And I see now in retrospect of this and all the subsequent gifts that it has brought me in terms of how I have attempted to move forward from that and to learn from that in a way that will empower me, and allow me to share that with others. I can only describe again this within like metaphor to the idea of the vocal journey. So I could say in a way I've been fortunate in that I've been very clear and lucid from as early as I can remember about my path or direction in life and where I want to go, and that all has always had a specific affinity with voice, with using it, expressing it, with performing, with singing in particular. And as time has gone on and my own journey with that has unfolded, the benefits and the beauties of that have only increased my desires to share them with others, and not just through the music that I create, but then also as I've learned new skills and tools, seeing that they can so easily be applied in a way that would have an impact on all other areas of one's life. So it's really been a natural progression of developing my own practice and then developing skills to share and transmit these to others in a way that can offer them support and encourage them on embarking on their own personal vocal journey, or to tap into and connect with them as they are already on their way. And so in a sense there's been this like trajectory or this line, and with my with my personality and determination, I suppose sometimes struggles have been actually about very clearly having a vision of what lies ahead, and then sometimes feeling disempowered about not being there yet, or kind of thinking, oh, like, how am I going to get there? But I know what I want and I know what I don't want. So that's my story in that sense. But I would say I was not so deeply reminded of this idea of life also being an active participant and having influence on your path until a big event that changed my life came my way. So I was going in this direction, and then I experienced the trauma of rape, which changed my direction. In the sense, I'm still doing now what I have always intended to do, love to do, want to do, feel called to do. But experiencing this event was like I suppose you would call it a crossroad moment. You go down one path or the other, and perhaps this reflects this kind of quality of ease and choice and empowerment about having two directions or branches to potentially follow. But sometimes life comes and it kicks you in one direction, and you don't so much have a choice about that direction in that moment in time, but you do have a choice about how you respond to your new circumstances. So after having been booted down one path that if I'd been given the choice of, I definitely wouldn't have chosen to go down that path. It was the more difficult path, the more painful path, the more challenging path, for sure. But in retrospect, 18 months down the line from, or more, since when that happened, no, a couple of years now since that happened, that was the best possible, that was the path I needed to go on. And I can say that now with absolute confidence and certainty, because in exploring the voice, pursuing this sensation and quality which arose and was triggered for me through transmission and a lesson with a teacher I had many years ago, it was like a confirmation moment of like, okay, yeah, no, there's this voice, but then there's this deeper voice, and this feels like something worth pursuing, and this feels like something right, and starting to question, okay, why doesn't it come so easily, and what is the impact when I start to use this sound? So in all of that excitement and drive to travel down that road, and having learned so much and been inspired in new ways up until this traumatic event, I was already beginning to get a taste of the freedom, the joy, the power of connecting with this sound, and then it was taken away from me, or it was assaulted, it was disrupted, it was lost. There are many different words, I suppose, that kind of come to mind, and the subsequent feelings around that of what that meant was like, okay, I've lost my voice. My voice has been destroyed. I have no voice. No one hears me. No one honors my truth. You know, lots of different, very, very core, very, very deep emotional stirrings, triggered by, you know, a complete violation of mind, body, spirit. So the reason I wanted to mention that was because that has only served to strengthen and reinforce the pursuits and efforts of this journey. Because once you've found something in your life that ignites you, that drives you, that gives you purpose and makes you want to get up in the morning, it is very, very hard to let that go. It becomes your lifeline, it becomes your support system, it becomes, without effort, the thing that defines you. And because there was already a connection to a kind of purpose, in one respect one could say, okay, it's not so hard to re-establish a relationship with something that is lost or feels lost. But then in another way, things that happen to you which go beyond your ability to rationalize them and understand them are very, very difficult to process, and completely change your whole way of looking at the world, how you feel about yourself, how you feel about others, how you feel about society, and really brings you face to face with all of these other elements, which perhaps you've never considered before, or it brings up old things which you had forgotten about or hidden away. And I would say that losing your voice, whether it's for a minute, an hour, a day, a week, a month, longer, is one of the most traumatic experiences I think you can have as an animal, as a human being. And there are lots of different ways in which that can happen. Lots of different ways in which that can happen. But when you have lost your voice through influence from external forces, shall we say. It reframes things entirely. And it's also worth to note that just because you have lost it does not mean that you cannot get it back, and that it cannot return to you with ever more strength, clarity, purpose, and truth. And that pursuing yourself, your self-development, your self-understanding, your self-mastery with inquisitiveness, with curiosity, with excitement, with commitment is absolutely a journey that is worth taking. And given the extremity of this example that I'm giving to you, and thankfully talking to you on the other side of that experience with a reinforced strength and conviction to what I believe to be really, really important. That does create new depths, really, of understanding about the different points along the journey. If we start from zero, if we start from nothing, if we start from no voice, and we build and we work from there, and we tend and we nourish and we invite and we open and we hold space and we encourage and support and give life to this seedling, does little by little, surely burst through, begin to grow and emerge. And that with time, with care, with attention, with radical self-acceptance and self-care, this voice will open and it will blossom and it will flower and it will emerge. And it will bloom and it will spread its pollen and touch other people, other places, other things, and that your unique frequency does matter. Your sound is important, your ideas, your deep intuitive knowing, all of that matters. All of that matters. And no matter what you experience, within the wider cultural context of vocal suppression or direct personal context through traumatic experience that attempts to push down and to eradicate your energy and your presence and your essence. No body has the power to take it from you indefinitely. Nobody is able to do that. It's within you. It's within you, and you will always be able to find it again.